Hello YouTube, I'm Jack Clark, the Eagle Musketeer, coming to you with another video. How are you? I'm ever so sorry I didn't do a video yesterday. I really was going to, but of course I had lots of stuff in my life that needed to be taken care of. However, very important news, of course, has arisen. Of course, if you have been living under a rock or haven't watched any other YouTubers' videos about it yet, the TCG ban list, of course, is being announced, and of course is going to be from the 1st of September, as usual. But this time it's going to end December 31st, so it looks like we're going to be getting twice the amount of ban lists, which is a very scary thought, and I've had people actually talk to me about potentially leaving the game because of it. The main argument being that because it's going to be too short, you can't be as invested in said format before Konami make more, somewhat, maybe potentially quite big impacts on said ban list in December, for example. But with that in mind, I'm going to keep this with a pinch of salt, really, because what I'm thinking, my theory is, and it has always been, since I saw the OCG ban list, where I saw that there's a lot of stuff that happened with the OCG ban list, and lots of stuff were happening that was different with the ban list, I thought that because there were so many changes with the OCG ban list, that it will mean, because they're getting more ban lists, it means they're going to make a minimal amount of change with those ban lists because they can update it more frequently. I still think that applies to this list. This list is gargantuan. So in addition to all the baby dragons and of course Spellbook of Judgment being banned from the OCG, it was also being banned in the TCG, alongside, I don't know, Stratos, number 16, Shockmaster, Card Destruction, Gateway of the Six, Heavy Storm, Monster Reborn, Pole of Avarice, Super Rejuvenation, Song of Judgment, and Ultimate Offering. Damn! Main hits there, which people are most concerned with. Of course, the hero players. I'm sorry, Luke. Luke is a friend of mine who plays heroes. Ha ha. Sorry, that's mean. But yes, of course, Stratos being banned, and of course, if not the nail in the coffin for heroes or for any other hero deck that isn't Elemental Heroes, because Elemental Heroes have now got emergency cooled at 3 as opposed to 2 before. But of course it's not really going to mean much because heroes are now pretty much dead competitively. But it'll be interesting to see what they can do with them. I mean, they are warriors, they can do stuff, they do have 3 emergency calls and a reinforcement of the army, so whether or not any other hero decks will be able to do any good. But we also have Destiny Hero Militias now at 3, and although it's not searchable now via Stratos, via its banning, we also have 3 Scapegoats, and we also have Plague Spreader Zombie, which is also now at 2 of this list. So we may have some Telidad reawakenings, but with the fact that Stratos is now gone is a really big hit for a lot of decks, mainly hero-based, obviously. Number 16 Shockmaster being banned outright is also an interesting card. Of course, it's one of those cards which I can kind of see the mindset that Konami are going through now when it comes to the decisions on limiting, semi-limiting, and banning cards outright. They're going now with the whole idea that if a card can systematically destroy a certain kind of deck, just for that deck doing a certain thing, doing what it does in its nature, then they are going to limit, if not get rid of them outright. My first example would be Prophecy. Prophecy, of course, having a heavy reliance on spell cards, which of course Shockmaster screws that over. Same with Eradicate Epidemic Virus, which is now at 1 with the new TCG list. So any card effects that would stop a certain kind of deck or stop certain interactions or that deck from functioning, they are now trying to get rid of entirely. But the main hits with this list that are banned, which people are most concerned with, I mean, like Card Destruction, Gateway of the Six, yeah, that's fine. That means Dark World and Six Samurai aren't going to be the biggest as they could have been in the new list. We don't have Heavy Storm anymore. And of course, for the people who had a heavyless format, it was kind of horrendous simply because it was a format of set 4 Summon Ryo Go, which was never a really nice thing to go up against, and it was truly a dice roll format in the truest sense of the word. You get the dice roll, you win the dice roll, you pretty much win because you can get the setup faster than your opponent can. And this is going to happen to this format to a lesser extent, however, because instead of just banning Monster Reborn and freaking Heavy Storm and getting rid of those cards, they have also placed limitations on Torrential Tribute, Macrocosmos, Eradicate Epidemic Virus, as already mentioned, Compulsory Evacuation Device, Bottomless Trap Hole, those kind of cards. And we've also got Dimensional Prison at 2, so very, very key and powerful back row cards, which would have been a horrendous factor if it was literally just heavy gone. But now those have been limited. It may mean that people are going to have to be a bit more inventive with their trap lineups. However, I and amongst other people are still going to persevere with trap heavy decks, obviously, because we do have a horrendous and amazing amount of traps in this game, so let's try something new, shall we? But with that in mind, heavyless format is I'm in kind of 2 parts with, simply because on one hand it meant that OTKs could OTK, which was bad. However, what it did mean is that back row heavy decks were kept in check, because you're not going to just set on your first turn, okay, I'll set 1. I could set 2, but I don't want to risk Heavy Storm. I don't want them to plus off me. It was the kind of the mindset that, of course, came part and parcel with Heavy Storm. People called it a necessary evil, and I was kind of one of those people to a certain extent. However, of course, it will be interesting to see how them limiting the back row that people can have, plus the getting rid of Heavy Storm outright, what this is going to mean. Because in addition to Heavy Storm being banned, we also have Solemn Judgment being banned. So we've got a hell of a lot of limitations in the back row, but we also have limitation on what killed the back row in the first place. So it will be interesting to see what that will mean for the format. Super Rejuvenation and Card Destruction, both cards from a bygone era, which I don't think should really have the interactions with modern cards as they do. Card Destruction, of course, meaning that Fabled and most specifically Dark World decks can plus ridiculous amounts and destroy your opponent, which really shouldn't be an interaction they should have, but is anyway. And Super Rejuvenation, of course, being a card that is very, very, very good. No longer as good as it was because of the Baby Dragons being banned with this list. However, it will now mean that such a powerful card, to all intents and purposes, cannot be abused again in future. So Konami can create dragon cards which do discard and do tribute, and not have to worry about discarding too much or tributing too much because of Super Rejuvenation. With it being banned, I think that's very good. Same with Ultimate Offering, of course, being a very old card, which of course meant that gadgets could just go, ha, derp, 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 derp. So the main hits, of course, will be that even though they did hit Prophecy and they did hit Dragon Rulers, the good thing what they did do is they did still hit the problem decks that were a problem before, of course, Dragon Rulers and Prophecies reared their ugly heads. So, of course, Atlantean Dragoons, Deep Sea Diva, and Delorean King, Tiger King of the Ice Barrier are now all at 1. I still think that Mermails are going to be very, very good. Dragoons is a horrible hit consistency-wise. However, we still have 3 Abyss Spheres, which we did not have with OCG list. Brotherhood of the Five-Fist Spirit, of course, meaning that 3-axis Five-Fists are going to be, well, non-existent in TCG, but of course it still does mean that 4-axis Five-Fists are going to be able to do something. Of course, Heavy Storm being banned means that they don't have to worry about their 5 formation cards being gotten rid of. But with this in mind, 5 formation Tenki is at 2 as well, so of course it's going to slow down Five-Fists generally, but Spirit is now going to mean that 3-axis Five-Fists, being a ridiculously consistent deck, is not even going to exist in the TCG. Of course, we have a Rescue Rabbit at 1. Rescue Rabbit, of course, is a great, it's fine actually, it's now actually going to be used for what it should be used. If your deck uses normal monsters, you can put in a copy of Rescue Rabbit, because you can, and now it will be good for a normal monster based deck. You cannot really make a deck based on Rescue Rabbit anymore, simply because of course using only one copy means that its consistency is going to be non-existent. So actually it now is going to be normal monster support, which I am full-heartedly behind. I do find it somewhat disappointing. I quite liked it in Aliens. You summon Rabbit, you go for 2 Shock Troopers, and then you go for King of the Feral Imps, and then you search for Alien Omni. But yeah, that was just for fun stuff. But for decks that of course can utilise normal monsters and do utilise normal monsters as part of what their deck is, then actually Rabbit at 1 will mean that it will see play in those decks, but not of course in bigger decks that can take bigger advantage of it. Thunder King Ryo, of course, is also at 1 from 2. Of course, with the systematic destruction of Heavy Storm, we need to kind of limit the cards that can stun and annoy your opponent. Of course, this is not just applying to trap cards, it's also applying to Thunder King Ryo, which of course is a nice one-off, I guess. However, we do have other cards that are coming out in future, which will mean that Ryo being limited isn't going to be as much of a factor. We have a trap card called Mistake, which I think is coming out, Shadow Spectres, if it hasn't already come out, which stops either player from pretty much searching their deck for cards without drawing them, just like Thunder King Ryo's effect. So don't worry, Ryo going to 1 is not going to be too much of a hit, especially considering the cards that are coming out in future, which means can replace it. Evergishki Mind August, of course, being a hit as well, which is odd because of course Gush Kraken, they got rid of the Gush Kraken loop simply so people can't use that loop. Which was fine. Mind August seems a little bit too much. Of course, it really wasn't a card that was very good for Evergishkis. It was only really good for Evergishki decks that wanted to loop and be degenerate. Of course, Konami having a vendetta against degenerate decks, so to speak, quote unquote, because we're not really sure what is in their mindset. However, it being a limit is fine. I have not seen Mind August using their deck that didn't try and loop something, so that's fine. I'm completely fine with being limited. Same with Delorean King of the Ice Barrier, which is also a limit, of course, which I've already mentioned is very, very good in Mermail. Of course, you have all your field on advantage on the field. You've got some Atlanteans on the field. You've got a Abyss Sphere on the field. Summon Delorean King of the Ice Barrier, return all to your hand. You reuse it later. Fantastic. It going to 1 is very good. I've never really seen a Mermail player use more than 1, but of course, like it said before, it was at a 2, I think, because of course it did have some loops. with it, which you could do with like Symbols of Heritage and other odd cards like that, which of course is fine. If you're going to get rid of loops, which it seems like Konami's is doing, Konami will do that, so that's fine. Next off, of course, we have Constellar Ptolemy's Messier 7, or M7 as it's also known in the TCG, which of course is going to 1, which is main hit to Constellars, which is an odd hit because, of course, with this list, lots of decks are going to be having a chance, Constellar being one of those prime targets. Constellars really need to use 2 of them. Using only 1 means they'll be, of course, a bit more stingy with which cards they use their M7 with, but to be fair, it's not going to be too much of a hit to anything else, because anything that did use rank 6s will only use 1 of this card anyway. So it going to 1 is fine. Constellars mean they're going to have to be a bit more less liberal with Ptolemy's Messier 7, simply because, like for me personally, I have played Constellars, and I do like the fact that you can go for a rank 3 high 80s and then go straight for Ptolemy's Messier 7, because it means that you can now have a 2700 attack point beta for instant. But we'll see. I mean, the main hit on Constellar is the fact that Kentenki has gone to 2, which means you can't search for cows, so that's going to be the least of their worries. Of course, I'm not going to go through all of the changes that are happening with this list because I think they're kind of inconsequential. I've already talked about them. Many of the other limits on this list are the back row ones, which of course, if you want to see the entirety of the list, like I said, in the description down below. Semi-limited, though, however, is much more interesting, where we have Mizuki Plague Spreader, TCG Striker, the aforementioned 5-formation Tenki, and Dimensional Prison all at 2 apiece. Mizuki and Plague Spreader, of course, being very interesting hits, which have been brought back, which is very nice, of course, with Shadow Spectres giving back, giving a new lease of life for zombies, allowing them to rise from the dead, so to speak. I made a terrible joke, I'm sorry, please don't hate me. But, of course, Mizuki being the main card out of those 2, to come back to 2, which means they have a new lease of life, which is fantastic, and and lots of players are very, very happy about Mizuki going to 2. I am being one of those players, because it will mean that, of course, so many decks now have a chance to do well with this list, because it wipes the slate clean, of course. Zombies now have that chance too, because they have 2 Mizukis. 2 Plague Spreader is kind of inconsequential, because zombies using Xyzes are better, because access to a Lavalval chain is simply, like, heads and tails better than a zombie deck having access to, I don't know, a synchro monster, which, to be fair, there are not any kind of good toolbox synchros anymore, because of course Brianak is now banned and has been banned for a long time. There's no real use for zombies to use synchros anymore. So Plague Spreader going to 2 is fine. It was a very balanced card anyway. I don't really think it should be on the list at all at this moment. However, of course, Konami do the classic thing, or okay, it's at 1. We'll put it to 2 just to make sure it doesn't do anything too horrible or anything. And of course, in future, they'll probably take it off the list entirely. With that in mind, we now have TT Striker now at 2, another card which I didn't really think should have been on the list in the first place, but of course, during the systematic destruction of synchro decks in the past, TG Striker was also one of those many casualties, now coming to 2, meaning that TG Engine for various other decks is now possible, and of course TG Stun is now revitalized and now possible, especially with the destruction of Heavy Storm. So that will be interesting to see whether or not it can be used. Of course, it's a tuna monster, which are kind of underwhelming in relation to Xyzes, like I've already said. However, its main the main thing about it is that it is special summonable, a la Cyber Dragon-esque summoning condition, and the fact that, of course, when it's destroyed, you can search for other TGs, which is good for consistency and good as an engine. So it will be used as an engine, TG Stun, and other things that require Wolf as a special summonable monster, because, well, it's useful and nice. So that will be an interesting card. Of course, Tenki going to 2 is going to be the main hit on Fire Fist and other Beast Warrior-based decks. Bujin, of course, really needing to search for Yamato pretty much as soon as they can to get all the cards going, otherwise they have to slow roll it and trying to summon their Bujin G, and then of course overlay slowly for Susanoo Wo, which is fine, and actually it still means that they can still function, but it means that they do take somewhat of a hit. Tenki, of course, being one of those cards that people were surprised that wasn't on the list the first time around when we got the first leak. But of course, it going to 2 is reasonable. I'm surprised it didn't go to 1 outright, but actually I don't think they wanted to kill Bujins and Fire Fist outright as well. So it going to 2 I think is fine for the time being. If it needs to go down to 1, it will do so in future. But even then, we still have MST at 3, so we can disrupt the activation of it. Next, of course, we have the stuff that is now off the list, which of course we have Destiny Hero Militias, which I've already mentioned, which of course people are hyping Plasma Controller, which of course is going to be interesting because we now have Scapegoat off the list entirely, not just from 1 to 2, but now 1 to 3, which is interesting. And of course the interaction that it has with Plasma, really allowing you to summon Plasma basically for free, is very nice, especially considering Plasma has the effect negation, which is going to be really not the nicest thing to go up against. However, of course, it means that Malicious being off the list, it also helped that deck as well. Of course, Destiny Draw still being a card that is that free and people can use at their own discretion now. However, of course, it not being able to be searched by Stratos is going to be fine, and meaning that it's not going to become overly broken now. Next off, we have the Agent of Mystery Earth now is off the list, which means now agents become a little bit more consistent, which means actually they could potentially compete on this list, which is really quite nice. And of course, they have always been a very good solid deck now, but now they have the added consistency of being able to get to their Venus as soon as possible. And of course, it being a tuna monster, meaning they can access all the groovy tuna new synchro monsters that of course have come out in Judgment of the Light. Next off, we have Tsukuyomi, which of course was a nice card which people used as a side deck tech, but other than that, it didn't really do anything. It was banned, then it went to 1 to 2, and now it's gone to 3, which is fantastic because of course in Shadow Spectres, spirits will be getting some actual inbuilt theme support, which means that of course they'll have their own Stratos and some other groovy cards as well. So Tsukuyomi can be now used, of course, as it has been, as a side deck card, or in a spellcaster deck, or now it can be used in spirit decks at any kind of number that a spirit person would like to use at their own discretion. That's great, and I love that. And it doesn't really deserve to be on the list anymore. It's a card from a bygone era that is really just kind of lackluster now. Next off, of course, we have A Hero Lives, which just makes me laugh just even seeing it off the list now, because of course Stratos being banned outright kind of means that A Hero Lives doesn't have any use. Paying half your life points for a Stratos, yeah, sure, that was something that people did, and it was somewhat justified, but I do not see A Hero Lives being used anymore. I mean, maybe in a Glad Hero deck, simply so they can get Prisma, but we don't have Bestiaria 2 on this list as we do with the OCG list, so I sincerely doubt A Hero Lives will ever see any more play ever again. But moving on, we have Black Whirlwind at 3. Of course, it has that 2 on the OCG list, but it's on 3 here, and there are many a player is now hyping Black Wings, which is interesting and quite good because they do have some good interactions with some new cards. Of course, no Heavy Storm means they can run lots of back row. Tour Guide means they can go for Fortune Tune, which is a really, really nice Icarus target, which has been discussed about in the past. But also the deck is actually quite good, and of course is able to do Xyz plays, and now is able to search for advantage and all that stuff. I'm expecting MST to see a lot of main deck use, of course, with the lack of Heavy Storm. So it being used at 3 in most decks most likely will mean that, of course, Black Whirlwind won't really run wild, and Black Wings won't run rampant as they have done in past format, simply because MST may actually be the deciding factor in that, simply because I do see people running additional spell and trap card removal in anticipation of really back row heavy decks, which is somewhat justified. However, of course, it will mean that Black Wings are going to take the brunt of that, and actually there's nothing quite like going up against Dust Tornadoes and Mystical Space Typhoons when you're running Black Whirlwinds and they being the sole pillar. I mean, if you can stop the Black Whirlwind, a Blackwing deck is so frail, it's not really going to be problem. So that will be an interesting thing to see whether or not Blackwing can now properly compete, and I really look forward to seeing them on the top tables. Next, of course, we have Emergency Call, which I've already said. Of course, with Stratos off on the ban list now, we have Emergency Call at 3, which was fine, but I mean, immediately it's not really much of a replacement because Stratos can search for any hero. Destiny heroes don't have what they need anymore. Destiny heroes can't work as a deck anymore, which sucks. And of course, evil heroes, who uses evil heroes anymore? Exactly, but now no one can use evil heroes because of course they're not searchable by any means, and it's kind of sucky that way. Although, to be fair, evil heroes, really the only utility they had, the only good card they had was Dark Gaia, so either way. Next off, we have Erratic Seal of Convocation is now at 3. Of course, it was at 2 before for some reason, but of course it can come off the list now because Heretics have done nothing. It means another deck that could potentially compete under this list, which is great and lovely, but who cares? No one does. Who plays Heretics? No one. You do? Nah. Anyway, of course, we have Potted Duality, which is also at 3, which is also one of the cards that people are very, very interested in. Of course, it will add consistency to a hell of a lot of decks out there, and of course will be a great replacement for Tenki and lots of Beast Warrior based decks, which do use 2 dualities anyway. So duality at 3 will mean that lots more other decks, slower decks as well, which don't have the inbuilt draw or speed capabilities, can now be a little bit faster and a little bit more consistent. So duality at 3, I don't think it should be on the list at all generally, because the decks that don't need it don't use it at all and already have the inbuilt support, because they'll be grossly they'll have so much support that they won't need that kind of thing. But the only decks that really need to use duality are the cards that really need that consistency and wouldn't be a problem otherwise. So meh. And of course we have Scapegoat, which is all side free, which I've already spoken about with Plasma Control, and people need to shut up about Plasma Control because we'll be able to work with it, because of course malicious can't be searched and all that inconsistencies in Destiny Heroes and blah blah blah. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Of course, those are my general thoughts and opinions on the changes to the list. Of course, in the description down below, I've already put a list to all the changes that are happening. Of course, links to the official website so you can see the actual list in its entirety. So yeah, that's pretty much it. In the comments down below as a video response, I would like to hear what you think of the brand new TCG ban list. Of course, I will be doing more TCG ban list-esque based videos. I may do some dueling videos, me testing ideas I have for the future, and stuff like that. But that's pretty much it, guys. I'm Jack Clark, Geek Musketeer. More videos coming out to you soon. But until then, goodbye.